Hello, everyone. I am your weather woman meteorologist, Amy Metz, looking at what's going on with the tsunami following this massive eruption in Tonga. This was an undersea volcano spreading ash all the way to other parts of the islands near Tonga and also rising the sea level. So here we see tsunami waves crashing into Tonga. This is the first set. They became so strong, here you go, that they just started ripping down fence lines. There's also videos of people trying to turn around in their vehicles to get away from waves. So today, all the way across the Pacific Ocean is a threat, all the way to Hawaii, all the way through the west coast of California, Oregon, even Washington, Mexico's west coasts. This is a very high threat level. This was a massive, massive explosion. There were eruptions going on since Friday, then again Saturday. And with that being said, there could very well be more. So I'll be discussing that sort of information here today in this video and who needs to be on guard. So go ahead and get to high ground. If you're in any of these areas in the South Pacific, for instance, here now is Fiji hours later. Thank you, Fiji Sea Salt, for sharing this live video so we can get a very good understanding of what this means.
Look here, guys, we have here water coming into land. It's never happened before. The high tide is so big.
Now he means in his
half
lifetime.
of the property is underwater.
In this area, this hasn't happened. This is so sad. Very messy, very dangerous.
But it looks like a tsunami. Somehow look.
Exactly. So this will carry debris all the way across the ocean. My very first reporting I ever did on a green screen was actually for the tsunami that occurred in conjunction with
A tropical storm in New Zealand has brewed up a gnarly southwestern swell, hitting our coastlines, bringing big surf to Orange County. Bulldozers are building sand barricades to help reduce the risk of flooding. Residents were alarmed on 11th Street to find that the rising sea level had moved their cars.
So that is something all the way from New Zealand to that's California. How about I open up a map and just show you guys first real quick too what this looks like. So on the map, we have Tonga in this area here. So French Polynesia, tsunamis. Fiji, tsunamis. New Caledonia, New Zealand, tsunamis. Again, for Vanuatu. And I can only imagine that the Solomon Islands might get some of this too. You can see this curvature here. This is underwater protection that can kind of barricade things, but what that really means is there'll also be a ripple effect backwards this way, and that can continue oscillating back and forth. So it is still very dangerous there. Now, in Australia, there have also been plenty of tsunami videos coming out, almost up to some rooftops there, 2.5 meters I've read reports of. So Papua New Guinea should also be on guard, be in high ground. And now just wow, like look how far this is. So here we go across the globe up to Hawaii. In the middle here, underneath the cloud cover, I have a broken screen, so I can't quite see it. Hawaii is right there. We go. I know it's close. So here we go with that. You can see some more undersea mountains here. But not much in between. So these waves will impact Hawaii as well. They will also impact the west coasts of Mexico and the United States. I would assume at least 1 to 3 feet here and there, especially the high tide, closer to 3 feet rises. And these are going to be very erratic seas. It's not the kind that you want to surf like that tropical storm that I showed you my report from more than 10 years ago. Now that was just before we had that 9.0 or so earthquake here in Japan that has been seeping nuclear waste into the ocean ever since. So with that, it was such a strong earthquake, we had people lose their lives all the way in Southern California. Millions and millions of dollars of damage right here. Now, looking at how far that is from the South Pacific near Tonga where this occurred, it's even closer. So do be on guard. Do not go into the ocean. Stay away from the coastlines. Don't go driving near the ocean. When these waves come in, they come in very fast, and they will just sweep you right back out to sea very easily if you're involved in this and in the water. So please get to high ground. Be careful, understanding that there could be more. This has been erupting for days, like I said. So I'm going to read a little report here because this was one of the newest ones, just updated from NPR, and I thought it gave a good overview. Here's that plume from Tonga, and very close by is Viti Levu, Fiji's main island, and all the others here that are going to be having some issues. Samoa, they also heard this. Vanuatu, they could hear the explosion in New Zealand. So after hearing it, then they saw the water rise. And so here, this shows that an undersea volcano erupted in spectacular fashion near the Pacific nation of Tonga on Saturday, sending large tsunami waves crashing across the shore and people rushing to higher ground. A tsunami advisory was in effect for Hawaii, Alaska, and the U.S. Pacific coast. There were no immediate reports of injuries or the extent of the damage, as communications with the small island nation remained cut off hours after the eruption. In Hawaii, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center reported waves slamming ashore from half a meter in Navaiwili, Kauai, to 80 centimeters or 2.5 feet, or 2.7 to be correct, in Hanalei. We are relieved that there is no reported damage and only minor flooding throughout the islands, the center said, describing the situation in Hawaii. On Tonga, video posted to social media showed large waves crashing ashore in coastal areas, swirling around homes and buildings that I started this video with. New Zealand's military said it was monitoring the situation and remained on standby, ready to assist if asked. Satellite images showed a huge eruption of plume of ash, steam, and gas rising like a mushroom above the blue Pacific waters. The Tonga Meteorological Service said that a tsunami warning was declared for all the archipelago and data from the Pacific Tsunami Center showed waves of 80 centimeters or 2.7 feet had been detected. I also saw other reports where people in New Zealand caught a blast, a shock wave of a low pressure drop drastically with this. So that was just in the air. It pushed all the air out and dropped the pressure all the way in New Zealand. So this is like 3,000 kilometers away or so. In Hawaii, Alaska, and along the U.S. Pacific coast, residents were asked to move away from the coastline and to higher ground and pay attention to specific instructions from their local emergency management officials, said David Snyder, tsunami warning coordinator for the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We don't issue an advisory for this length of coastline as we've done. I'm not sure when the last time was, but it really isn't an everyday experience, he said. I hope that elevates the importance and severity to our citizens. He said the waves already slamming ashore in Hawaii were just under the criteria for a more serious tsunami warning. And so here it's going to say later on that in Hawaii, waves and strong currents are expected for many hours. That's what I was saying just this entire weekend. If I were you, I would not be trying to play around in the ocean. You will just randomly have erratic waves come out with strong currents that can drag bodies out to sea. And this is how people have died in my own town before, all the way from Japan. So here they're talking about Japan. Authorities in the nearby islands nations of Fiji and Samoa also issued warnings telling people to avoid the shoreline due to strong currents and dangerous waves. The Japan Meteorological Agency said there may be a slight swelling of the water along the Japanese coast, but it was not expected to cause any damage. So on and on with more stories here. And exactly where it's located. This was an NPR discussion. I'm going to now open up that Invest Moved. I was curious. Yes, this is the one I was watching for this weekend that I said may form into a cyclone. So that'll be in other news with more updates coming. And you can always find more of that on my Facebook page, Weatherwoman Amy Metz. So YouTube here, Amy Metz is included, but on Facebook it's not. So what I really want to look at here is a wide view of the swells. I'm going to look at waves so that we can get an idea. This is what I use to decipher just how strong the top waves will be. This does not image the underneath swells, just to be clear. So there will be water underneath this surface layer that we're seeing the directions for. And so this generated here. We already had some rougher seas to Hawaii, and because the swells are still kind of pushing northward here, it has a lot of a westward pull, but there's a northward component telling me that that could get worse for Hawaii in the coming hours, just as that report had said. I would very much agree with that. And now Cody is cycling, about to make a landfall near New Zealand. And so do realize that this storm itself is already pulling ocean toward New Zealand right here. The low pressure systems in the southern hemisphere do spin this way. So that is taking more of that action from the tsunami and giving us a higher chance for storm surge in New Zealand as well. Even though Cody had been calming down, this will be a double push for the water. Now with Fiji, it looks like they're kind of right in between with the swells. So that is probably why it wasn't quite as big. I'll bet you that a lot of this tsunami got pulled right toward New Zealand. And that is, again, also, I'm sure how there were such strong, tall water rises in Australia here on the eastern coast. I was surprised to see the video there where that water was almost up to the rooftops, and now I can see exactly how that would make perfect sense. So when I talked about Papua New Guinea staying on guard, that is still a threat, but as you can see, most of this will push directly into Australia. Some will travel slower toward Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, but have some like reverberations here, back and forth pushes underneath the surface water. So understand that these might not be as tall of waves in this part of the world, Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, but it will be very rough seas. So there's no reason to go in the water today. Don't go fishing on the shoreline, please. I'm wishing everybody the best through this. And I can see how and why Japan, yeah, they might get some little bits of a rise, but nothing major. I would not assume any damage there. But then coming out toward the west coast, there are some opposing swells at the surface. Now for this part of the world, I was more so expecting that there would be those under the surface pushes that kind of, especially along here where the continental shelf is, these waves, when they're low underneath the water, and let's say like 100 feet deep or so, there's walls here under the water. Very, very steep, just cliff sides. So when that hits here, it'll push back. It'll go back and forth onto different cutouts of continental shelf under the water. So it might not look like the hugest or biggest rise in water, but it will be very rough seas. Erratic, back and forth, dangerous drags here and there. So be on guard anywhere in the Pacific, especially Hawaii, especially New Zealand, Australia, and all these islands right next to Tonga, and all the way out to the Cook Islands and French Polynesia. I hope everybody can make it through this okay. I can only imagine, the widespread damage that will occur here. And just the most important thing right now is that everybody can get to high ground and avoid any more problems or avoid getting pulled out to sea that way. So I'm going to check this specific news update site before I sign off here, and then I'll see if anybody had any questions. Oh, I guess, here we go. How do I get right to the... This is a group I just joined. Let's see, if I go to groups, it'll pop up. Here we go. I really appreciate the posts in the Pacific Newsroom group. It has been really helpful in understanding what's going on. We felt some mild tremors and heard a series of booms right as far away as Norfolk Island around 6:52 p.m. this evening. So that was at the time of the eruption. The island of Kete and the Lau group, Fiji, have been hit by tsunami waves. Those are the videos I showed at the beginning of this video. So it doesn't look like any new news. Oh, here we go. I'll show you the video of this then. This one I haven't seen. Oh, goodness. So the ash was raining all over, and people were hearing this 1,000 kilometers away. Now those waves are going all across this half of the world. So we have new land forming, perhaps, but as a result, there is a big warning here to get to higher ground, and also the possibility that this could happen again. Now, I'm not a seismologist or a geologist. I'm going to look up here. Let's say forecast eruption Tonga again, something like that here. I'm curious if there's any authorities that do that will put out warnings for possible future eruptions. It's kind of hard to find. It's not really a set in stone science yet, and so government sources, our most credible sources, they are very slow on getting behind that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure that there's anything here that's going to have a forecast for that. But if I find anything, I'll be sharing that on my Weather Woman page on Facebook. That also goes to my Instagram. So there'll be a lot of pictures there. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any kind of advancements or, let's say, forecasts for another eruption. But I would personally say, because this has been active for days, it could very well continue in this state right now, just from what I've studied and learned about volcanoes while living in Hawaii. So yeah, a pressure change, that's the pressure surge I was talking about. How interesting. So the shockwave blast pushed air, it just pushed the air away in a shockwave, and New Zealand's air pressure then dropped down. So yeah, seeing nothing about additional possibilities. Here we go. Is this something? It says Professor Shane Cronin from the School of Environment at University of Auckland told the New Zealand Science Media Centre that research into historical eruptions by the same volcano suggested that the current eruption episode could last for weeks or months, and that further similar sized eruptions to the 15 January 2022 event are possible. So he's saying here that confirming what I had assumed then, is that while this is active, it can stay active for days, weeks, or even months. So do be on guard. What that means then is make sure that you're following some sources where you can find out right away if there is another eruption and how big it is. One of those will be my Weather Woman page, another, that Pacific Newsroom. Another way how I found out about this, I saw a plume on the radar, on the satellite, excuse me. Satellite data shows us infrared. This is showing temperatures in the sky where there's particles. It's detecting from a satellite in space that there's particles in this area, and then it sends back an estimated value for that temperature. And right here, I noticed that this plume grew and disappeared. And as I was in a live talking about, oh, this is an unusual plume disappearing, somebody says that is the eruption. So that was a Friday eruption, right as it was happening that I was in live. There you see it grow in this 12-hour loop. So very quickly, all of this mass erupts, goes into the sky, and starts moving west. Because this is moving west, it's another indication that this invest here is very likely to move west, as I had been forecasting, perhaps turn into a cyclone. Now with this eruption, I would say that there's less chance, even less chance, it will bother Tonga and Fiji because of the waves pushing back this way, and a couple other features. There is I think, a higher likelihood that this storm, even if it becomes cyclonic, an actual cyclone, will then drift south and have less chance for any direct landfalls. Although there is now, another area that I had been watching here for days, and as this is all occurring, it could actually help spin up this cyclone, which would have more of a direct impact on Fiji. So I'll continue updates with this, and I will always share how you can stay safe. So don't be too scared. I'm not here to scare anybody. but it is the middle of cyclone season, and we also had this double whammy with the tsunami. So it is just time to be very diligent about checking the weather and making sure you know your safe zones, understand where there's shelters in case a tsunami or a cyclone comes. They have very similar impacts where water is the main pillar. People getting sucked out to sea is definitely, it's been documented at being 90% of deaths in these storms. So high ground, not on the same side as where it's going to have a direct impact. You'll want to be on the other side of the island. In this case, with this storm, it could perhaps cross Fiji, but I'm going to go ahead and do that information in a different video. I'll look at the wind gusts on this as well. This is surface level winds. And we can see that, yes, this storm, I said it wouldn't be a bother to this area, but now that there's a tsunami, it could have more of an impact with rising seas, especially on these northern coasts, and then later on into Monday on the southern coasts. Even a little bit on the west where it really, really was bad with Cody, Cyclone Cody. So after that, this is exactly the storm that I was wondering about kind of brewing up and having the chance to spin around here for a little while. But really the bigger problem, I think, would come next Saturday for this area. And so that's the one that I had been sharing about being perhaps a bigger problem before the tsunami hit. So now that there's the tsunami, kind of increases the problems here in Fiji over the next couple of days with rising water. And all that means then is just be careful that you are at higher ground and you can stay there. Don't go driving along the coastline or anything. And I'm going to stop this here because we're far out in a model forecast and they're not very accurate. And I just want to show you the big difference here. This is the European model, ECMWF. This is the GFS. This is the icon, which doesn't go out as far, so it went back a little. But here with GFS on Saturday, we are seeing that there's a cyclone forming. It is there. That's the one I've been talking about and waiting for. The model right now is showing it won't make a direct impact to Fiji. It's always my hope, and I will continue updating that. I'm going to do separate videos for that stuff, and just before I leave, though, from this feed, I will put on the steering wind current because Cody is moving this way, and so I just want to show a little bit of proof as to why these things are going to keep moving west, what's developing to the northwest of Fiji. Excuse me, they'll keep moving east because all of these winds here are moving east at the 500 millibar level halfway through the sky. Has a lot to do with where these storms will go. That and warm water. So I'll check if anybody had any questions. It says that was one heck of a volcano. Good morning, madam. Your prayers with Tonga people and animals. Yes. Yes, we are praying for you. All of you over there, there's a big problem here, and unfortunately, this could continue on for the next couple of months. So it's just be aware, understand ways that you can see this, like I showed you on the satellite loop. If you see a big plume, all of a sudden there, a big circle on the radar, that's one indicator that it just happened. And of course, there's news sources that you can follow and check up on, because if this happens again, these waves, they do move pretty fast. So it was just a few hours to Fiji, and then about 6 hours to Australia, about 8 to Hawaii, and I guess, I would assume it's about 12 to the United States. And again, those will be much smaller water rises, but very erratic seas. Could still have a little bit of coastal flooding in the States and in Mexico, but with the swells how they are, I believe it will mostly be an issue for people out at sea. So best wishes to everybody through this event. I hope, we can get through this prepared and stay safe for the most part. So our thoughts and prayers are with you all, especially in the South Pacific, hoping that this new land can form a little less aggressively next time. Smaller bursts, please. Less sea rise, please. Those are my thoughts with you guys. Just remember, stay on high ground through the weekend and out of the ocean. This is your weather woman, meteorologist.